I wanted to build a working hospital monitor in Minecraft so I could accurately show off some physiology in my upcoming videos. So far I've made a functional ECG machine whose tracing accurately correlates with the heart beating. I've just taken this waveform and pasted that into this monitor. Though I'm essentially missing all the rest of it. In this video I'm going to be focusing on replicating the oxygen saturations and respiratory rate only, so expect a part 2. To make these numbers as accurate as possible, I decided I need to accurately simulate the body's homeostatic systems. Subtle changes in this are actually what control your breathing rate. So to make it accurate, I needed to find a way to balance the pH, or the acidity levels in the body, the sugar levels, and the oxygen saturations. To do this, I need 4 systems: the lungs, which manage the oxygen level and the carbon dioxide level; the kidneys, which help manage the acid levels; the liver, which helps manage the sugar levels; and this system here, which generally just simulates the metabolic rate of the body. So first up is the lungs. To replicate the physiology of these, we need to first understand what they're actually doing. The purpose of the lungs is to take in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, and they also play a vital role in the acid-base balance of the body. You may wonder how they can control the pH of the blood, given they're just managing these 2 gases, but what most people don't know is that carbon dioxide, when combined with water, which you have plenty of in your blood, forms a substance called carbonic acid, which is, of course, acidic. By blowing off the carbon dioxide, your lungs indirectly lower the acidity of your blood. This acid-regulating ability is actually a primary driver for your respiratory rate. If your blood is too acidic, your lungs are used as the initial dumping ground for this acid by way of blowing off the carbon dioxide. So I of course wanted to code that logic into the system here. I then realized that the blood is actually slightly alkaline with a pH of around 7.4. If I only had carbon dioxide, then the closest I could get to is a neutral pH, because I can only breathe out all of the carbon dioxide I have, leaving water, which is neutral. As a result, I need an alkaline molecule to raise the pH a little bit, and that's where the kidneys come in. The kidneys play a major role in pH management by producing a molecule called bicarbonate, which is alkaline. They constantly recycle this bicarbonate that they've made. This recycling process keeps the bicarbonate levels in the body very stable. The main downside of the kidneys is that they are slow to produce this bicarbonate, and it generally takes around 2 to 3 days for them to properly respond to a raised acid level in the body. So in summary, we have the lungs taking in oxygen and pumping out CO2, or the acid, and the lungs are very quick at shifting the acid away. And we have the kidneys, which after a couple of days will either start dumping or producing bicarbonate to lower or raise the pH. So now I have the bicarbonate level and the carbon dioxide level, and I need to now use these to calculate the pH so we can determine what the respiratory rate should be. To calculate the pH, we use this formula. So if we punch in the bicarbonate number and the carbon dioxide level, then, we can't really do that in Minecraft with the scoreboard commands that we have, because there is no logarithm. So instead of this, I just calculated the value inside of the brackets and then kind of mapped that onto a pH. So I use this Excel sheet here to calculate all the different ranges of pH that we can get from the different values. And I found that a ratio of 20 would give us a pH of 7.4, which is bang on in the middle. Any ratio above that was slightly alkalotic, and anything below that was slightly acidotic. So I took some ranges from these numbers and then used them to estimate the pH, and then I used that to control the respiratory rate, which worked pretty well for my purposes. Now, when the blood is acidic, the lungs will breathe faster, and when the blood is alkaline, the lungs will breathe slower, which is perfect. So now I have the respiratory rate sorted out, and the next step is replicating oxygen usage/balance. As I noted at the beginning, this is a machine here that kind of burns up the glucose and oxygen and makes carbon dioxide, also kind of simulating your general metabolism. This provides some of the carbon dioxide which the lungs breathe out, so we don't go into the negatives, but it also uses up some of the oxygen we have breathed in. It should be noted that I said breathing is controlled by acid levels, and this was mostly true, though there is a thing called hypoxic drive that kicks in when your oxygen level is low enough. This makes you take deeper or more frequent breaths to get oxygen in. I added on a little checker system to see if the oxygen levels were low enough, and then if they were, then this machine kicks in, which makes you take more frequent breaths. So there's the controlling of the oxygen. Of course, since I'm burning some sugar, I felt like it was necessary to implement a place where the sugars would come from, and that's where the liver comes in. You might wonder why I chose to use the liver to represent sugar management and not something like the stomach, or something, but if you keep watching, I'll let you know. So when you eat, your food can get broken down into sugar or glucose, and this is absorbed into your bloodstream. Insulin comes in and then pushes the sugar into the cells that need it. If this was the end of the story, you need to be eating constantly, and what your body does is it stores the sugar away to use for later. Excess sugar your cells don't immediately need will typically be stored as glycogen, which is a comparatively huge molecule, and you can just think of it as a ton of joined together sugar molecules. A quarter of this glycogen is stored in the liver, and it's one of the first places that is tapped into when your blood sugar is running low. The process of breaking down this glycogen is called glycogenolysis, glycogen relating to the glycogen molecule and lysis relating to the breaking down of that molecule. And the other thing that the liver does is a process called gluconeogenesis, with gluco referring to glucose, neo meaning new, and genesis meaning the formation of. And so in summary, this is the formation of new glucose or sugar. So this is why I chose the liver to regulate the sugar levels in the blood. The liver can also do some other interesting stuff, but a little bit more on that later. So measuring and controlling the sugar levels is essentially done in the same way as I did with the pH, just with a little bit less calculating. These command blocks look at the scoreboard value for sugar, and if it falls within a set range, it will clone over this repeater with a specific delay, making the liver spit out more or less sugar to keep the levels within the normal range. That there was generally just homeostasis summed up in one big machine. There's a lot of other aspects, for example electrolytes, but I think the control of these would warrant their own video, and they don't really do much for my monitor project. So the next logical step is to put this machine to the test and see how it handles common acid-base abnormalities. The first test is respiratory acidosis. In this state, the lungs aren't doing a good enough job at clearing away the carbon dioxide, and so in this state, the carbon dioxide level is high. Causes of this might be because the airway is blocked, so carbon dioxide can't physically leave the body. The lungs might be full of fluid, so gas exchange isn't taking place properly. Or you could be breathing air that's got a high concentration of CO2 in it. Regardless, the resulting factor is that the carbon dioxide level is high, and then this causes your pH to drop, meaning you become more acidic because there's more acid floating around. And as noted previously, because the kidneys take a little while to kick in, you're essentially just having to hope that the issue resolves, because they generally don't kick in fast enough to save you. Though there is one exception, and that is COPD. This is a chronic obstructive lung disease, and so generally the CO2 level is built up slowly in this condition. This slow building of CO2 can lead to the kidneys actually starting to kick in to help. And if we speed up the timeline to show how these kidneys start working, we can see that the kidneys have produced some bicarbonate, which offsets the acid and returns the pH and respiratory rate to normal. So if we take this ABG report would be read as respiratory acidosis with full metabolic compensation. When the carbon dioxide level is high, it's respiratory acidosis. When the bicarbonate level has increased to normalize the pH, then it's considered metabolic compensation. And the full section of this means that the pH is returned to a normal range. Next up is metabolic acidosis, and this is when I realized we don't have a good way of simulating this. So I quickly implemented insulin into the model to simulate diabetic ketoacidosis, which is one of the more common types of metabolic acidosis. In this condition, the patient has little to no insulin in their body, and as a result, the sugar sensors don't work and just read as 0, regardless of how high the sugar in the blood may be. So I add a little section here to demonstrate this, and when this redstone block is here, that means that there is no insulin present. This signal sends a signal to ensure that this comparator does not produce any output, and then this is shown by the light not turning on when a signal is put in the back of it. So this makes the body think that there's no sugar, and so what the liver does is it goes into overdrive and produces tons of sugar, which the body still doesn't recognize. The cells also can't take this sugar in because there's no insulin, and so they're still screaming saying that they're starving, which prompts the liver to produce some ketones as well. And the liver needs to produce a lot of ketones to keep up with the energy demand of the body. These ketones are acidic molecules, and the sheer volume of these quickly overwhelm your stores of bicarbonate, which leads to metabolic acidosis. And if you remember how the lungs are very quick to fix acid-base imbalances, well, they notice the acidic state immediately, and they cause you to breathe in and out very quickly to breathe off as much acid as they can. Though generally in such extreme circumstances, they can only help so much. So if we take this ABG here, you can see that the lungs are working overtime, and the pH is still acidotic. And we call this state metabolic acidosis with partial respiratory compensation. We can tell this is metabolic acidosis because the patient has a low bicarbonate, and given we can tell the lungs are helping because the carbon dioxide level is low, it means the respiratory section is helping to compensate. Though, because the pH is still acidotic in spite of this compensation, we call it a partial compensation. If you happen to be in this diabetic ketoacidotic state long enough, your kidneys will make a good effort to produce bicarbonate too, though they continue to be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of acid/ketones. So the only fix for this is to administer the person some insulin, which completely halts ketone production, because your body can finally recognize that your blood sugar is actually high. As a result, liver production of sugar drops dramatically, and then this allows your body some time to clear it. The kidneys will eventually clear out some of the remaining ketone bodies and then build up their bicarbonate stores. The building up of these stores can take some time, so you'll typically remain in hospital until it's all balanced out. So that there's my ABG machine, and so now I can plug in the respiratory rate, which I've got accurately mapping the physiology, and the oxygen saturations, which also accurately map it into the monitor. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there'll likely be a part 2 where I focus on some form of temperature measuring system and blood pressure system. I'll also get the waves working on the monitor too for the oxygen and the respiratory rate, so subscribe if you want to see that. And remember to check out the ECG video if you want to see another video like this one where I go into the technical details of the human body and replicate them in Minecraft. See you guys.